First of all, I want to thank all of you who have come out on a Saturday morning, taken part of your time and effort to come to this church to deal with this issue that is vexing to all of us. I think that by the virtue of the fact that you are here, you don't really need any persuasion. You have resisted and refused to fall into the media led narrative, which has been justifying what is going on. I just want to say that most of my life, I have worked on human rights and international law. I worked very hard at documenting very carefully and meticulously the violations of international law that is involved in the oppression of Palestinians, in the occupation, in the system of apartheid, and in the system of, frankly, supremacy, Jewish supremacy in all of Palestine. The working assumption was that evil lurks in the dark, and that what is necessary is to use the weapons of light against the forces of darkness. That it is important to collect evidence and publish it, articulate it in a way that is indisputable, so that neutral people and even foes cannot avoid the reality that they will see, and that somehow that will bring an end to, or at least ameliorate, the worst of the violations that were taking place. Of course, I knew that international law by itself and the exposure of human rights violations by themselves do not necessarily lead to the full reconciliation and the peace and the justice that we all seek. But I really thought that that was an essential part, that the majority of people, certainly in the world, in this country, but also even in Israel, once they know the facts, once they see the reality, would have to act accordingly, and this would create a huge opportunity for justice and for peace. The last 4 months have really shattered much of that assumption. We saw a situation in which an actual genocide can take place openly, publicly, in real time, known to everybody, undeniable, and still take place. You know, the Convention on Genocide is difficult to prove because you have to prove intent. In this case, there was no need to prove intent or to infer intent. It was stated up front from the beginning. Genocidal speech by Israeli leaders from the top to the bottom were very clear. We need to destroy, we need to eliminate, we need to flatten. We will treat those people as human animals. We will cut off their water and food and medicine until we achieve our goal. And the goal that was stated was not to defeat militarily, but to totally eliminate and destroy. They said Hamas, but they actually meant Palestinian resistance totally in the whole area. This is so horrible and horrifying, and it is taking place in front of our eyes every day. Because when you cut off water and food and medicine, what is left? Your enemy is clearly not just the military, the combatants of Hamas, but the entire population. You have 50,000 pregnant women. You have more than half of the population of Gaza are children that have nothing to do with Hamas. But even if their parents voted for Hamas 15 or 16 years ago, Hamas was a political party that was standing in opposition to some of the corruption of Fatah and the Palestinian Authority. So to say that Hamas itself is such an evil that it needs to be obliterated and anything related to it legitimately can be and should be destroyed, already once you buy into that kind of thinking, you are allowing yourself to do something genocidal. Where we stand today is really a very difficult place. As people of faith, as people of conscience, as people who believe in human rights, as people who believe in nonviolence, as people who believe in peace, a just peace, as people who believe in reconciliation, in the possibility of a better future for Jewish Israelis as well as for Palestinian Arabs, we stand in a very, very uncomfortable position. And the tasks before us are totally different from what I thought they were 4 months ago. Because now we see that the truth is out. People now know, even despite everything that's in the media, and I've never seen the media so unified behind the official narrative, which in this case is the Israeli narrative, that Hamas started everything on October 7th, totally out of context, that Hamas is barbaric and evil, that the legitimate goal is to destroy Hamas totally, and that anything that happens in the meanwhile is collateral damage for which Hamas is to be blamed, rather than those who perpetuated the actions. That kind of narrative, I think, is falling apart. And now the new task before us is, what do we do then? In a real way, as Reverend Mundir Ishaq once said, the Palestinians will survive. Somehow they will survive even this genocide. The question is, will the rest of us survive? Morally, ethically? Will the international legal system survive? Will the concepts of human rights survive? Will the method of working of many NGOs, really good, decent people, survive? Will Zionism survive? Will Jewish people who are torn, and some of them are extremely conflicted, how will they survive as ethical and moral human beings? That is the real question before us. What do you do when you are faced with unashamed, unabashed, open exercise of brute power? Brute power, insisting on having its way, regardless of international law, regardless of humanity, regardless of public opinion, regardless of the logic that says that this will never work. This will never provide you with security. I guarantee, already we know that at the end of this war, so-called war, whenever it ends, Israelis will be less secure than they were before October the 7th. Somehow the passion, I suppose the desire for revenge, the obsession of the Israeli army, which was caught and humiliated by an attack on its military bases as well as the villages, the kibbutzim that it was supposed to guard. Uh, they doubled down on the concept of violence is the answer. More massive violence is the answer. We somehow have to restore. We have to restore a concept that the other side will be so hurt that they will not think of doing something like this again. So-called deterrence, even though after it has been proved that deterrence will not work, and that eventually you have to make peace with the Palestinians, not oppress and control them and smash them. So what do we do? Where do we go from here? Where do people of goodwill move once we face a situation like this? I can think of at least two things that we have to do, which we really haven't done very well so far. Two new tasks before us. The first is really take action. It is not enough for us to educate people and to reveal and document the truth of what happens and somehow expect that automatically things will change. No. Our leaders, our media, our politicians, our church leaders, not just political leaders, have all failed to speak out sufficiently and powerfully against this genocide that is taking place in real time. So we must find new tools. And that includes direct nonviolent action. That includes, obviously, boycotts, divestments, and sanctions. That includes shaming, naming and shaming those who are implicit and complicit in this genocide within our own communities, within our own countries. We have to make life miserable for those politicians. There should be no event at which any Israeli official appears or any US official appears. We have a campaign season coming up, and it's not just on the presidential level. It's on the level of city councils. It's on the level of state and local representatives. Those who have failed to speak out against this genocide, those who have hesitated to even call for a ceasefire, need to be called out, challenged. We need to make their lives miserable. We need to confront them with the reality of what they have done. It is not enough to simply write a letter to your congressperson anymore. We're beyond that. We need direct action. And yes, sometimes we need to have civil disobedience. Yes, sometimes we need to disrupt. We need to block highways, train stations, major events, sports and cultural events. We need to make our voices heard very concretely in a way that we have never done before. And I'm glad to say that I can see a lot of that taking place already. Many people have started along that path. Now this has to be the path of our activity. The second thing that we need to do has to do with the Jewish community in this country. The Jewish community in this country is really very much conflicted. On the one hand, They see what is happening. And the majority of American Jews that I know tend to be liberal, progressive, humane, decent people, usually on the right side of almost every issue in this country. Yet when it comes to Israel and Zionism, they are conflicted. They do not feel comfortable with Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and the Israeli government and their actions. On the other hand, they are genuinely afraid because not only because of the pull of tribalism and the feeling that they need to protect themselves, but they really are worried about the rise in anti-Jewishness, anti-Jewish anti-Semitism. We need a new word because Palestinians are Semites as well. But you know what I mean when I talk about anti-Jewish anti-Semitism, that actually exists and is on the rise. And the power of the organized Jewish community, its ability to influence major sectors of our society, including the government and including the media, feeds into some of the very tropes of anti-Jewish anti-Semitism, and in fact make Jews less rather than more safe even in this country. How do they deal with this crisis and with this dilemma? We need to be there for them. We need to speak out that anti-Semitism is wrong and is a sin and should be fought wherever it is found, but that anti-Zionism and anti-Israeli policy and and holding support for Palestine is not anti-Semitism. That there is room and there is a place for Jewish Israelis in Palestine in any future of that area. That they are going nowhere. That when we say from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free, we mean it must be free of prejudice, free of racism, free of Jewish supremacy, but not free of Jews. They are there and they live there. And whatever else we may think about how they got to be there and how they took land and displaced us in order to be there, they are there. And we must think about them in every future possibility that we create and talk about. We must have a role for them, and we must understand them, and we must assure them that their interests are also important to us. I thank God every day for those brave souls from Jewish Voice for Peace, If Not Now, Circle of Bereaved, Rabbis for Human Rights, and other Jews who are saying, not in our name. This is not Judaism. This is not what Jews are and what Jews believe in. We need to uplift those voices. I look at them as allies, as very important people who work with us in the struggle for justice and peace. How do we deal with that issue? I think is going to be very important for all of us. I see my time is up, but I really think that we have our tasks before us, not for the sake of the Palestinians. As I said before, Palestinians will survive somehow, but for our sake, for the sake of our integrity as human beings, as Christians, if we are Christians, as people of God, if we believe in God and that we have to be his people, as decent human beings, if we still believe in humanity after all that we have seen and experienced. This is the task before us, our liberation. The liberation of Palestine is necessary for our liberation in this country. Thank you.